All right, so here we are today. I am really excited about this. If you don't know me, my name is Mark, and I am known on YouTube as True Poker Dealer. I have, since 2007, been in the casino industry, specifically teaching people how to be poker dealers on YouTube since 2012. And I am joined today by a very special guest, Tommy Ho, somebody that I actually don't know so well. But I did a live stream recently in the room last week, and we had a cool conversation right after it. And I'm very excited for today. Tommy doesn't actually know this, but the world of like the stuff that he teaches is right up my alley, which I'm very excited to say.
Sweet.
So I'm really excited. Just so that you guys know, if you want your comments to be read and answered, I do my best to get to them during interviews. It's a little bit tougher. But just pop your comments right in the chat. If you have any questions for Tommy, we're going to get to that too. But Tommy, why don't you introduce yourself right now and tell people a little bit about what you're all about as well?
So I play poker, but I'm actually more of a business startup guy. I like to do business. I just go for big ideas, and when you fail, when you go all in, you have to rebuild. And so I use poker as a way to always rebuild. And then if I once to get going, I find another idea, I hop on. So I'm in the rebuilding mode for my last idea, but throughout all this, as I play poker, I kind of realized that I'm starting to discover that you can actually use poker as a way to train your mind so that you can actually become more mentally healthy. So then not only do I use poker as an opportunity to generate income, but I also use it as my training ground to build my mental toughness and my mental game.
Okay, so I appreciate that very much. So let's start sort of at the beginning with you just to get like a baseline, right? So how long have you been playing poker? How many hours a week do you play, and what stakes do you play typically?
So I started at poker in 2008, and I jumped on Poker Stars, and that was I was pretty much a break even play, really kind of short stacking 20 big blind player. So that's when I started, and I just went and I grinded my way to a little small bankroll, and I decided then right around I think 2010 to go for Supernova Elite. So I decided to the best strategy for me was to go multi-table because I used to be a gamer, StarCraft. So I was very fast and
Oh,
quick.
interesting.
Yeah, so I decided, okay, this is probably the best way for me to get Supernova released. So I went multi-table, full ring, 1, 2 through 2, 4, and 24 tables at a time. And that's where I got started. And then once I got going, I decided, hey, I need to invest, and I started hiring coaches. And I think collectively throughout my online career, I paid about $20,000 worth of coaching throughout. Like the highest amount was about $350 per hour for a coach, and but it helped accelerate my game. And so I never stepped foot into casino until Black Friday. I was pretty much an online player, and then once we have Black Friday, I went to WinStar, and I was the break even player for 6 months because of adjustment time. But then I started becoming a cash player from there. And now I don't play online anymore because I just don't enjoy it anymore. Whereas cash game I enjoy it because it actually allows me to do actually other things. Whereas online you're just focused on just executing and been playing flawless and no mistake.
So just in case somebody's watching and they don't know, Black Friday in retail is obviously the Friday after Thanksgiving where you buy a lot of stuff. But Black Friday in poker is a completely different thing. It's the day that the online poker world officially took the knife to the heart, where the U.S. government enforced the Unlawful Internet Gambling Act and shut down Full Tilt, Poker Stars, Absolute Poker, and some others as well. And that certainly changed the scene in online poker. So nowadays you're playing live poker predominantly. And it sounds like from what you said, you go back and forth playing poker and then building up and going after startup business that you come up with in your own way. And then poker's there for you. And so if we see you constantly at the tables, that means that you're in between building up a bankroll again and also working on your mind, right?
Yeah. So so I want to. What you mentioned was the Unlawful Internet Gambling Act, which was the reason that kickstarted me into poker. Was because before that I was building a sports arbitrage software, a bot to beat the sports book. So I had, of course, a lot of my bankrolls in all these sports book. And then when the George Bush signed the law, well, all the sports book took off with the money, and that was the first collapse of the first startup. And then
Yeah.
that's when I was like, okay, well, I need to do something. I can't go get a job. I'm kind of screwed right now, so I gotta do something that's more of a risky but higher payout. And poker was the opportunity.
Yeah, that's interesting. And just to reminisce a little bit, I remember Black Friday, they locked up all my money in NetTeller. That brings a lot of people back for sure. Yeah, NetTeller is something I haven't heard in a long time
Yeah,
either.
I remember that teller.
Yeah, so interesting. Okay, so I sort of teased in the thumbnail that I made for this video. Winning something more valuable than money at the poker table is sort of you know the truth here, right? Like people think about going to play poker just to win money and use that money in life. And either you get lucky or you treat it as a game of skill. But either way, you're going to that poker table to try to win money, and you're taking names and all this stuff. Whatever you got to do to win is a lot of people's mentality learning the game. But there's something else that's even more valuable that you can gain at the poker table. And in our brief discussions, you've mentioned that you have some really cool techniques in order to be able to achieve this value for yourself while playing poker. So could you talk a little bit about the mental game and what else you can actually win at the table?
Yes. So we all know poker is a game of what? Observation. And observation starts with perception. And so perception is what we see. So if we go from there, then we go, well, our reality is based on our perception. What we see is our reality is based on what we see. So if we can train our perception, how we see things, then we can actually start to change our world. And then we know that poker is all about perception, the way we see things. So if we can start using poker as a way to, hey, this is not incorrect perception. It's the world is shrunk into just a microcosm of just nine people in a table versus you having so many variables. How now you're limited to very very small variables that you can actually isolate and work on. So you can use poker then as a practical and methodical process into working, training your mind. And this is not like some kind of belief in theory, but it's actually a process, a practical process, and you can actually work through it. And not only that, but because life, like a lot of these things in life that we think we know, we don't have insight into it. And because we don't have insight into it, because we can't relate to it, because we can't relate to it because we don't have the experience through it. So poker give us these experience that we can relate to now. So then we can, okay, now I have deeper insight into what this means. And the simplest way I could kind of compare this to is like you can read all about eating a mango all your life and you will never know. But the minute you taste the mango, well, now you have the insight. And so that experience is only you can know through experience, and nobody else can tell you at all. And all these examples happen through poker.
Well, I definitely appreciate that insight. And I'm sort of going to break down what you said for me so that I can make sure that I'm getting it the way that you're putting it out there. And then we might dive into this a little bit. So the first thing you're saying is all of us are just kids when we start growing up, facing everything in the world, right? And we are just thrown into the world with our unique set of circumstances, trying to figure out what reality really is. And we learn a lot of stuff that's not real from people around us, from ourselves. We take guesses at the meaning of everything around us, and we're wrong so frequently, right? And it's a huge thing to undertake all at once. And you're saying that the game of poker has enough in it where you're learning, you're trying to win money and stuff like that, but you're also trying to figure out, who is this person that's at the table next to me, in addition to what is it they're trying to do. And if you have certain techniques, you can actually teach yourself about reality through a simpler, smaller world of poker, where then you can take those lessons and bring it back to the real world and apply it to everything. And that's what you're saying, right?
That's absolutely correct. And that's the key goal. Our goal is to try to work on ourselves and work on our mind, because if we cannot, and to go deeper is a very simple process, because what we're really doing is we're wrestling with our own emotions, our own thoughts through constantly. And that's what at the core is with meditation, is a constant battle between you and your thoughts.
So not only is this value that's greater than winning money at the poker table all about figuring out how to interact with reality, you're actually saying that you can train yourself by creating a system for yourself that will do this at the poker table, and you can also do it in real life as well.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So why don't you give us one piece to this puzzle of how you go about training yourself to see reality properly at the poker table? Is there a first step for somebody that would like to try this themselves?
So do you want me to look at it from the perspective of a dealer or a player?
I appreciate that question. I know that my content is usually about being a poker dealer, but I think that you're probably going to speak best about being a player, right? Have you ever dealt before?
I could speak for both.
Oh, so you have been a poker dealer?
No, but I know enough. I have enough insight.
Okay, well let's do this. Let's start with the poker player side, because that's actually what I was anticipating we were going to talk about right now, and then we can certainly transition it. But yeah, let's do poker player first.
Okay, so as a poker player, we think suffering is bad, right? But we all suffer, and mental suffering is so we don't understand suffering enough. And poker actually helps us to understand suffering, where it come from and everything. And the mental suffering that we come from is arise from our own thoughts and our own perception. And our perception is what we see. But we don't have insight in that. But if we look deeper into the events in the hands that we play, we can see that when we take a bad beat, well, what happens? We all of a sudden nothing in reality changes, but within ourselves, our mind, we suffer. Like, why?
Ooh, I have to stop you at this point, because I want to take a moment to take it in, because I know you're going to keep going, and I feel like the audience needs this moment too, right? Yeah. So if I have pocket aces and I go and I raise pre-flop and someone re-raises me and someone else re-raises, and then I go all in, and I have this feeling about like, all right, aces, let's go. And then I end up losing all the money that I was planning on having at the poker table, and I get a bad beat and I end up losing with aces. The next hand that comes along, I'm going to feel this suffering feeling if I'm not you, right?
Correct.
So that suffering feeling, the thing that you're pointing light to, is really just internal for me.
Correct.
So what is it about that that's just internal for me? What happened there?
Well, the key is you just want to have insight into it, because when you have insight into it, you will understand it. But nobody ever looks deeper, right? Okay, why are you suffering? If we have we ever asked that, why are we suffering when we took that bad beat? Then we can start looking deeper. And the answer is we're suffering because of our thoughts. Our thoughts arise from a sense of detachments of the chips. The chips, we have a sense of lost, right? Our perception is that we lost something. And from that perception causes thoughts, which causes emotions, negative emotions to arise, which causes us to suffer.
So what could we do to adjust our mind in these moments in order to align properly with reality?
To realize that the core, the origin of our thought, the origin of our suffering is arise from our thoughts. And then we know that thoughts manifest through perception, and we could control it. We could at least alleviate our suffering if we realize that these are just thoughts, and then we go backtrack, and that understanding alleviates the pain.
So the first thing that I'm hearing is proper clarity of what's happening in reality can detach these connected thoughts that connect to our emotions, correct?
Yes.
And the proper clarity, and I think we might have to say this like 3, maybe 4 times, even though we're repeating ourselves, in order for somebody to be able to really grasp it here. So the proper clarity in a moment where you're taking a bad beat is, number one, the thoughts that we have attachment to outcomes instead of attachment to reality. Is that true?
Correct.
And those outcomes are, we need to, I'm gonna say this, pop this up here. I had a major bad beat with aces this past Sunday, still steaming over that. I finally gathered enough for a buy-in, built up a nice stack, got it all in good and went broke, right? So actually, why don't you respond to this comment right here? So what would you say to Patrick? Patrick, thank you for sharing this comment.
If it's really a bad beat, it's really a bad beat. That's part of poker. We can't be result oriented. So then I would go back and say, did you make all the right decisions? Were all your decisions solid and well grounded? And if you did make the right decisions, then you got a bad beat. But then the key is most people don't make really good decisions, and they attribute to the bad beat. But it's almost like you put yourself in a position to get a bad beat.
So what is an example of a decision that would put him in a position to get a bad beat that would be this painful?
So I don't know the decision to. I'm looking at where he went broke and he's crying, and I would say, well, you shouldn't be playing your role unless you're willing to lose it, and then because then you're mentally prepared for it. You don't have any expectations of winnings because so these are I'm gonna paraphrase a lot of things, and it's gonna just stop me when anything gets hard to grasp. Like the difference between perception, expectation, reality is disappointment. And so we don't have any expectations. We don't have any disappointment. If he went all in, if he went in without the expectation of winning, and he knew that there's gonna be bad beats, then that's reality. But but if he don't go in not expecting bad beats, then that's that's perception, and so it causes us to have mixed emotions when things go on, and we can't handle those things anymore. And it happens a lot where people overroll themselves in poker, or take chances, or take shots, or do things that are, and then they expect to win, but they don't have that mental readiness to lose, that balanced mind. So then when the bad things happen or the good things happen, they really, I guess their mind kind of go out of control where they get too emotional.
So I think something I'm hearing here is it would be a great idea for somebody to think like, hey, if I'm going to play in this game, I need to actually take some time and put the mental energy into even asking myself the question, hey, is this something that I'm prepared to lose? Because like in Patrick's case, and Patrick, you were willing to put this comment out, so I'm using you as this example. It sounds like you brought maybe 1 or 2 buy-ins total, and therefore you didn't have the longevity to necessarily make it through the swings that can happen naturally in poker. But I think it might be even more powerful to not make this about poker at all, and make this about observing your own emotions right now. Like right now, you're describing you had a major bad beat with aces this past Sunday, and you're still steaming over that. You finally gathered enough for a buy-in, built up a nice stack, got it all in good, and went broke. Well, if you observe that about yourself, and you observe the fact that you put yourself into this situation, that's a really powerful thing for you to look at, right? And that's sort of what you're saying here.
Yes, and I think that's it's an opportunity. Like suffering is really an opportunity, because it's because when we are doing well and we are happy, we kind of falling asleep. We are just cruising through life. But when let's say our house is on fire, or in Patrick's case, we took a bad beat, well, it stings, and that stingness awakens and gives us that moment of clarity. And if that moment of clarity actually allows us to reflect back on the event and look at it and self-inspect, and then we can see a lot of the illusions that are causing all these things, suffering.
And that the word illusion is really powerful there. So the implication that one little word that you threw in there means, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you have a pattern in your own personal life in relation to poker that can lead to this outcome, right? Your pattern is the thing that led you down this path to the point where you put yourself in a situation using your own decisions that led you there to potentially end up steaming over something like this. And the question is, how can you change your own pattern by looking at yourself? Is that right?
Correct. So, and that's where we go to the 4 stages of learning, and we could apply to poker. And the first stage is I don't know that I don't know, and that's why all players are continue to be bad, because they don't know that they're bad. They keep making the same mistake over and over, not knowing that it's a mistake. Because in poker, you can make a mistake and be rewarded, or actually do something well and be punished. So then there's nobody gonna accept you to be honest with yourself that I played bad. But if you don't know that you played bad, then who's to tell you? And that's the almost the hard wall that 90% of players can't crawl over. They cannot get past the first step, because once
And
you see
well,
that, mm-hmm.
I want to jump in. So saying that you played bad could either mean you played bad in the sense that you made bad decisions with your cards, or maybe it means that you didn't have enough money to begin with, or you didn't mentally prepare yourself. Is that what you're saying, or are you just talking about the cards?
I made a mistake again. You made wrong decision. Like there's really no
Gotcha.
good or bad. There's incorrect and correct and optimal. So anytime I say bad, I really should correct myself. Like this is the opportunity for me to also correct myself. Is that in poker there's really no bad or good. It's just optimal, positive, negative, suboptimal. And when you make the incorrect decisions, it's suboptimal because it's not efficient. It's not plus EV for your life. So there's always practical, and we can always analyze things versus having opinion of good or bad.
Let's reiterate that. Plus EV plus
Yeah,
expected value, meaning that over the long run you're going to get value of it if you do it over and over and over again, right? Regardless of what happens in that one moment, over the long run you will get positive value if you continue to make that same decision in that same situation. And you're saying come up with plus EV decisions all the time. And you know, in Patrick's case, I'm going to put this comment back up. This is such a powerful comment here, right? Because since let me see, still steaming over that, and it happened on Sunday and today's Tuesday, right? So that's 2 days of suffering,
yeah,
right? And think about how that affects like his thought process. And by the way, Patrick, I can relate to this. Okay, this is absolutely something I have experienced, and it sounds like Tommy can relate to this too. And it's not like a good poker player starts a good poker player, right? Like you have to start as a bad poker player, or maybe Patrick's a good poker player and he just underrolled, and so in that sense he put himself on a life tilt a little bit. But so all right, I appreciate you letting me interrupt you with your four. What were the four? What?
The 4 stages of learning, because the first stage is the hardest to get to. Is that you don't know that you don't know, because and it's
You don't know
almost,
what you don't know.
yeah. Sometimes you have just got to be lucky that maybe have a friend or somebody that kind of knocks you in the head and say, "Hey, you're kind of screwing up right here. You're messing up." And otherwise, you go through life making the same mistakes. And earlier, you mentioned that we all started off being born, and we're born to different customs in life and different way of
Circumstances,
thinking,
yeah.
everything. Yeah, circumstances, and those build us habits, and these habits and beliefs, and we go through life thinking that they are correct because they are our habits and our beliefs and our foundation, and but we never question why two people have conflicting habits and belief, and how is it correct on both. So can't be, and that is because a lot of these habits and beliefs are incorrect, but we carry them thinking they're correct because they've been ingrained in us. And poker is a way for us to recognize these bad habits and break them, and as well as train new habits through iterations. And poker is a game, is as you go iterate, you get better. And that's the second part, is that once you iterate enough, then you start learning and you start stacking. And the second stage is that I know that I don't know.
So, all right, before we get to I know that I don't know, you said something there that's really powerful as well, which you've done this a few times already in this short period of time. Iterate. So one of the beautiful things about the game of poker is you can put yourself in incredibly similar situations over and over and over again. Whereas in life, if you have patterns and habits that don't serve you, is the way I would phrase it, those patterns and habits are going to be very hard for you to understand whether they're healthy or not, because you're not iterating in such a confined area. You're doing different things with those same patterns and habits, right?
Correct. Exactly.
Pretty much. Yeah. And so then also you made the comment that people with different beliefs, maybe they have their upbringing, you know, we don't question them enough, and some of them are not correct and some of them are correct maybe. But I would almost rephrase that instead of correct, let's go back to plus EV in our life, right? Like some of them don't serve the person, even if they were taught to us by our family. Just the reality is, the fact is that those belief systems that you're talking about, a person has been taught not to evaluate whether it's actually giving us value or hurting us. And fortunately, like you said, poker is this space where you're in similar situations. Like if you have an ace of diamonds and a king of clubs, and you're third to act, it's the same thing effectively as having the ace of hearts and the king of spades, which is the same thing effectively. So there's these situations that come up over and over and over again, and you're going to be against a similar number of opponents, and there's all this stuff that you can learn over and over from.
Correct. So as a poker player, that's how you get better, is that you don't get better one day by, okay, I'm going to 3-bet this guy, I'm going to re-raise this guy, I'm going to check raise this guy. What you do is you repeat the same pattern, but you change one variable. Okay, I'm going to just add in ace king suited in this spot and check raise here, or I'm going to add in like ace 3 suited or something like that. Then you can actually see the results as you iterate. Versus when you're changing all of the wall, which most poker players kind of think they do, you don't learn anything. And if just within the poker room table, if you can't do that, then most people, it's hard to have a chance in life, in practicing in life. So poker, actually, that's where you can start learning by, those are process and learn by by getting better as a poker player, you will get better at life.
So I have to challenge you on that though, because if I were to make an adjustment with one hand, such as ace king suited, and by the way, I'm not saying I disagree with you. I'm trying to understand what you're saying. If I add ace 3 suited to one situation, that one situation is not going to come up that much in live poker. And how do I actually tell if it's a good decision or not? That's something that I feel like a lot of poker players always want to know.
You go big. It's data. Over over a certain amount of data of hands, you have sufficient data to know whether it's plus EV or not. And that's enough simulations to tell you. So let's say on the button, you want to increase your BPIP, your percentage of hands you play. So you, instead of just adding all over the wall hands, you start adding in ace suited hands, and then you go to king suited hands, and you go to queen suited hands. So you're systematically adding in variables, and your variables are calculated versus random variables, and that's the what I'm trying to point at.
I gotcha. Now, the thing that I'm sort of asking though is, I imagine that that's very easy to keep track of if you're playing multiple tables online. But when you're playing live, like literally, how do you keep track of it? Is it just you remember it on a specific level? How do you do it?
You well, ideally you have somebody else to break down the hand with you and tell you if you made a mistake or not. And most
you get a mentor.
Yes, and ideally that's why I pay for coaches, because coaches are valuable, because they're the only one that could actually give you a straight answer. Your friends are going to tell you, going to pat you on the back.
Yeah. Okay. So now you're saying if you have your system and then you make one change or two changes at a time, and then you talk with your coach about it, now you have specific results. You can talk through a hand and you can get real feedback about whether or not those new decisions are valuable. Correct?
Correct.
Gotcha. But realistically, the thing that we're talking about here isn't necessarily just about improving your poker game. It's also about improving your mind. So actually, let me go on a tangent. What's it like to be you at a poker table?
It's nice. It's peaceful, because I see a lot of things that people don't see, and so people don't see that I see these things. So it's funny. It's a fun game when you have all the variables that people don't see. So it's a mind game, which makes it interesting. But it's also so in between hands, I also use it as a practice, because meditation is you just holding your mind still and just observing your mind. So in between every hand is an iteration. So anytime you want to meditate, you can use a hand as a meditation because all you have to do is just observe what's going on and just breathe. So it's an opportunity every time. So I use it as a game. I use it as a training ground, and it's fun.
So in order for you to meditate in between decisions, I think is what you're saying.
Right.
How do you do it? Where do you put your feet? Like talk us through it on a real specific level.
Well, you wouldn't do it in a decision when you're in a decision because you it's the
No, I'm sorry. I was saying in between decisions. So like if you don't have a hand, that's your time, right?
yeah. So then you just watch your breathing and watch what's going on at the table without thoughts. That might sound simple to say without thoughts, but you also a lot of times you're trying to analyze and break down everything. But there's times where you just watching, and that's really at the core what meditation is.
So it doesn't matter how you're sitting in the chair. You're just sitting there however you're comfortable, right?
Yeah.
And I'm asking that because I think meditation often has a specific posture to it, etc. So then where are you facing? Are you moving your head as stuff's happening, or are you staying still?
So meditation is also all kinds of levels, like exercising. So a person who is just starting out shouldn't worry about posture. Like a person who just starting exercise to just learn how to walk. So the first thing you got to do is just learn how to watch your breathing, because what we don't realize is that most of us are walking zombies. We're in a state of waking sleep, and you know that because right when I tell you this, you're watching your breathing, and right when you're watching your breathing, only you know that shift in consciousness has happened, and that now you have that sense of awakeness. But eventually, within a few seconds, it's going to be gone, and you're going to fall right back to sleep because what's going to happen is you can start thinking, you can start analyzing. So, and then you can realize, oh, and eventually you might realize we don't know how long that you start thinking, and then you go right back. Well, I'm watching my breathing. So that's the very first stage of meditation is you
So
got to conflict, you got to battle back and forth.
so when you say watch your breathing, if I were to try to watch my breathing, the thing I would do is like just I think what you're saying is keep my attention on the fact that I'm breathing, right?
Correct.
But okay, so when something happens in front of me, do I just keep my attention on? So what is it that's supposed to kick me out of watching my breathing? Should it be when I get my cards for the next hand? Like what do I hold on to? What's a cue that I can use to get me out of this moment and back into poker for a second? Or is that not? Am I missing the point here?
The key, the good thing is you don't have to worry. You will automatically fall out. You won't be able to stay in for that long.
Well, give me a goal though. Like how long do I really want to be doing this in order to know that I've done it?
If so, the test yourself. Look at a clock dial and try to go for 30 seconds without thinking. You won't even last that long. And even you're right there trying, and you won't even last that long. So that's how hard it is. And so,
Okay. Am I counting my breaths? Am I
no, you're just watching without thinking.
watching?
You're giving all your attention to your breathing. That's it. But what the first thing you're gonna realize, what you're gonna do is, I gotta stop thinking, and that itself is a thought already.
Got it. So, so you're basically saying that putting all your attention on your breathing is a trick to turn your mind off in order to. So, I mean, because even that in itself, you're thinking about your breathing, right?
Yeah.
If you're putting your attention to that.
Yes. Except there's one thing we have to be very careful. We're not turning our mind off. We're actually seizing control of our mind and being the master for that one brief moment. The rest of the time, we're slaves to our own mind, being dragged away by thoughts. And that's why we suffer and we have all these mental, you could say, unease, dis-ease, because our minds have been dragged away. And that's why when we go back and we keep hear people say, well, I watch my breathing, I feel so relaxed. Well, that's our natural state because we're in control of our mind. We have held our mind still. So that's the taste of the mango that you're tasting. And we taste it, but we don't want to keep eating it. We want to go back to being back to our old habits and customs and ways of life, the state of waking sleep.
Uh, there's still something here that I want to receive from this little tiny piece of conversation so that I feel like I could go and do this at a poker table. We're going to get there in a second. Riff Raff Games says many players could benefit from this
Yes.
practice. Too many are buried in their phones between hands and miss out on the opportunity to observe the other players. That makes a lot of sense to me. Now, if I were to, speaking of the phone, let me turn the phone from a bad thing into a good thing in our minds for a second. If we were to take our phone and set it for a 30-second timer, because there's no clocks in most poker rooms, would that, if we can just focus on our breathing until the timer goes off, is that a win in itself?
That's a super win.
Okay, so something that someone could do if they're playing poker and they want to try this is set a 30-second timer, put their phone on the rail, set a 30-second timer when they're out of the hand, and just try to make it all the way to the end without thinking anything other than focusing on the breathing. Is that correct?
You could do that, but that's not as fun as being at the poker table. And here's why.
No, I'm talking about at the poker table.
Yeah. At the poker table, what you rather do is don't use in between hands and just observe, because or just pick a something, because what you don't want to do is fall into patterns, because any little pattern that you start developing will develop habits, and you won't train if you develop habits. So by actually using a hand, there's no 30 seconds. It could be 5, 10, 20. So you don't fall into patterns, and that's better to not fall into patterns and to keep training 30 seconds, because you might be able to go 30 seconds, but then now you just go develop one pattern. You really didn't.
I see.
So
you're saying up until you get both of your cards for the next hand or something like that, right?
Yeah, pick a time. Okay, when the dealer starts pitching that first card to when the dealer mucks everything is when, if I'm not in the hand, I gotta put everything down and give all my attention to my breathing. That's when I usually do it. Like after I fold, I sit up straight. Because when you give all the attention, you don't want to be hunched over like this. You want to just adjust yourself a little bit and then start breathing. It's that simple. It's not that hard, and it's not that. But we're too stuck in our pattern of muck the card and pick up our phone and start pressing buttons. We don't really look at anything. We're just looking at the phone because it's a pattern, and we don't know that either. And that's what's funny, and that's what I observed.
And that's what Riff Raff Games says as well. And I would totally agree with it. Now, just for the audience to know, I have started dealing at Texas Card House in Dallas recently, and I've been working there, and I'm getting myself back into dealing, and it's interesting. And I've dealt to you. I think I remember it once or twice. I know that I dealt to you in a tournament at one point. Yeah. And the next time I deal to you, I'm gonna be watching you now. I'm gonna be curious to see what you look like at the table, and I'm pretty excited to experience Tommy at the table, watching him meditate. It's gonna be fun, man.
Well, I don't meditate all the time because, especially now that there's some exciting things going on that I've been following. But I do use it a lot, and I talk to the dealers. It's better to get a survey of what the dealers think of their perception of my demeanor at the table. That way you can see. I'll be interested to know what they think too.
That's pretty cool. So it sounds like, though, would you say that you've mastered meditating at the table in general?
I'm not even close.
Really?
That's the thing, that while I feel like I'm far ahead of the average poker player, I'm not even close to where, like, to even be saying that I'm good. That's where we're far. That's how far most of us are from where being in control of our mind.
Interesting. Is there anyone that comes to mind that's like a master at this at the table?
None that I know, but I know like before COVID, I went to Vietnam 4 years, four times in 1 year, and I looked into Buddhism, I looked into monks, and I look into the way, the way of living and their minds. Like most people think, oh man, a monk must suffer because, man, he give up everything, like meat, food, liquor, wine. And then I tell him, I like, do you suffer because you gave up your GI Joes? Like, no, you just renounce your GI Joes. That's what the monks did. They don't care about liquor and wine and meat and pot and women like I do still, you know. So I'm still mentally weak, and these monks are like super mentally strong. So I know where I'm at compared to them, and I'm not even close.
So it sounds like though, like I gotta probably give you more credit than you're giving yourself compared to somebody like myself who doesn't do this at the poker table. I mean, I've meditated, but it doesn't sound like it's the same thing as what you're talking about. It sounds like you have a very strong mental game when it comes to this stuff in general. And you know, just looking at your background right now and the stuff that you have behind you in there, this is all stuff you made, right?
Correct, but this
And it's inspired by you, right? Like you're a peaceful guy.
it just like clicked like within the last 2 years, like ever since I started doing this training thing, because I took a pretty hard fall twice the 5 years. So each time, you know, when you, like we said,
You're talking about your bankroll, right?
yeah, like a startup, you know, like
I
I
got
tell people like what I do, and just like I build up a good chunk of bankroll, then I go. My ideas are like going all in, knowing you gotta hit runner, 2 outer and 1 outer to win. Because like in this world of startups, there's no okay, do okay. Either you bank or you bust. So I bust. But
that.
like
Listen,
I learned why each time. But every time I bust, when I come back, you know, like you sit there and you mentally suffer because you dwell on these thoughts and these what ifs and these expectations and these, because you have these goals and stuff, and then reality crashed, and then you're sitting here grinding back from nothing. So it wakes you up, right? So and then these last 2 years, actually, these plans, like I was before that, I was kind of like your poker player, you know. I played, I would, well, I just didn't do anything. Like I didn't meditate, I just kind of chill. And then those two kind of you could say bounce is what helped kind of awaken me.
that's interesting too. I'm really curious. We're going to talk about some of your entrepreneur endeavors too in a second. I put this up, so I just want to address it. Riff Raff Game says, after this stream, try and pay attention to your breathing for 5 minutes. I can promise that you won't be able to get that long without other thoughts coming to the front of your mind. I mean, Tommy's already said 30 seconds you won't even be able to do.
Maybe 5 minutes. I wish
5 minutes.
I don't think I could go for a minute. Like if I'm honest with myself, after about getting close to a minute, the first thing that's going to come to my mind is it a minute yet?
Oh, interesting. But you do have some success with it, it sounds like, where you're at the table and you're able to clear your mind at time. And what does that do for you? When you successfully give yourself even that 20 to 30 seconds, what does it do for you? What happens?
It gives you that sense of peace.
Which does what? What does peace do for you?
That's it. That's where the phrase comes, the reward is in the journey and not the results.
So spending time in complete peace at the poker table without the stresses of what happens if I want to try to get money, who am I going to get it from? Like giving your mind a break is essentially what you're saying, right?
Yeah, it is the peace itself. That's the reward itself.
That's interesting. It's something to wrap your head around if you haven't experienced it. It's like you said, you know, someone's got to taste the mango, right? If they've never tasted the mango, they don't know what it's like. If you don't know what it's like to experience short periods of time at the poker table of pure peace, then you're missing out, but you got to experience it in order to know what it's like, right?
Exactly.
So very interesting stuff. And I'm curious now. So what is the startup that you're most excited to share with us? Give us one that you worked on.
Which ones? Well, I failed on all of them.
Yeah, but failing is a part of the journey. I failed at some, man. I raised over $600,000 and I'm sitting here with nothing from it. I get it. So what do you got?
I'm actually quite proud of all of them. So let's start with the first one. Was I couldn't beat sports betting. I was a DGen, right? I was like maxing out my credit card and losing. I graduated college debt free and had an MBA, and then it would like during the .com bust. So I was like, can't work. I was like, I need to make some money. So I started gambling like a DGen, maxing out my credit card and losing, and I was like getting tired of paying these sports book. But then I figured out a way to beat them. I started arbitraging them. So then I did it manually, and then I figured out, well, I could. There's a systematic ways to do this. So I went and hired a Romanian programmer to write a bot, and then I bought these sports book, and that's when I started doing well, and then put out of my bankroll into all these sports books to start arbitraging them, and then when Bush kind of wiped me out. But then I
wait. What does that mean that Bush wiped you out?
With the Unlawful Internet Gambling Act.
Oh, so you actually successfully started this whole thing, and then I remember like it was yesterday. It was July of 2006. You're saying when that law was passed, you actually had to stop at that point.
Yeah, like I remember like the sports book NASA, Bet WWTS, like where Bodog eventually bought them. Like I had bankrolls in a few of them, like Pinnacle didn't. I don't know about it. I can't remember. Yeah, something one of those acts. So
Patriot Act. Interesting.
But that didn't. I came back from it, right? I rewrote the bot book because that's when these paperhead books started coming out, and they didn't know about this stuff. So they started giving people huge credit lines. So then I partnered up with people that were able to get paperhead accounts. So I remember the busiest November. It was like college football, college basketball, pro football, pro NBA. At our peak, we had like $1 million in pending bets in one day. So we were doing well. And then, of course, some partners started bragging and doing everything. And then, technology started catching up. And I got blacklisted in Dallas.
So, oh, really?
Like no bookies will give me. And then like it got to the point where I was doing on my own and bookies were not paying, collecting my losses and not paying me. And there was like, if you Google like Bet Phoenix scammed me, there's actually a story that I wrote that trying to recover 25,000 back then when I was young. So it was meant a lot to me when I got scammed. I felt like I got scammed by a legit sports book, and I wrote that blog and no one believed me. So the story's still out there, I think. So that's the first internet story that I have. Which I had more. So
that's pretty crazy, and you still haven't gotten that money. It sounds like.
I don't like. It's so old that I don't think like management decisions change already. That I don't think they're gonna reflect back on it. It's just a story.
So you get a $25,000 story, right?
Yeah.
So nowadays,
interest and inflations.
Right. Based on what you're working on nowadays or what you're headed toward, do you have anything that's not confidential about anything that you're working on today that anyone would be interested in hearing?
I actually have an idea that I just like. I've lost my passion for business because I just don't like. I realize that I'm chasing illusions. So I have an idea that I just don't know what to do with, and I actually don't mind somebody just taking it and run with it because if they could do something good with it.
Well, let's hear it then.
So my last recent venture that busted was because I started building poker. If anybody in the poker business know that Poker Bros came up around the last couple of years. Well, before Poker Bros, there was PP Poker, and I was the kind of running the thing and operate. I knew what's going on in Dallas. So we went to Vietnam and built our app first before Poker Bros started. Poker Bros was actually the CEO was started under us, worked with us. So long story short, they spent $1 million. They won. We spent $300,000. We lost. We have 80% of codes sit on the side with nut trash. So then I like, okay, well, we got to pivot. So now I pivoted to sports betting, taking the same model and pivoted to sports betting. And I rebuilt it, but then COVID hit. And then so everything went bust though. And I just decided I'm not going to do it again. And then now somebody kind of convinced me to try to get going. So I built the foundation of it again. And this is kind of launched already on like valuebet.app. And this actually has like all the club membership and all the stuff already on there. So it's sitting there, but I just don't have that passion anymore. And I like in the startup world, you don't have that passion and you don't have that cash flow. You just don't have any chance of success anymore.
So let's see. You're saying it's sitting there. Is this the thing that you're talking about? So what do we do to see so that just so we can see what it is? If you don't have the passion, maybe somebody else wants to take it over. There's stuff that's already been built, right? What do I do here?
So the reason I built this is because poker right now, all the agents of all the clubs and Poker Bros is spending about 300 a week in accounting to do manual accounting. That takes about 12-hour turnaround to process. Then they have to distribute all that data reports to their agents. So this allows them to create a club, create members, upload, and generate all that report instantaneously. But it takes. But then I try to go to these clubs and say, hey, you can use it free, and they just rather stick to the guy and pay him 300 a month. The 300 a week, 1,200 a month, and I realized like I have a big barrier of conversion to convert these customers. I just don't. And then the reason I built that is because if I get all these clubs to enter the customers and agents and everything up, well, I have an entire system of customers use the database and clubs and everything, and I just developed the sports book that I already built and launch it.
So let me see. I'm not the best multitasker. I was trying my best.
So you create a club, yeah, what you did, and so then just name your club and then create that club, and then you invite your members to the club. So go click on now you have a club, and you can invite your members, and you can assign them agents, sub agents, and then you upload your reports, which is you can download from Poker Bros, and then it'll generate all your reports for you. So that system is built, and it just takes marketing. But right now I kind of just enjoy meditating and just playing poker. I just don't want to take on the initiative to get this moving. I built it. It's there.
So wait, but just so I understand the rest of this, what is it somebody would use this for? This is for, and I'm not saying, you probably already said it, and I'm sorry for that, but
it's the foundational intent to get the going is for Poker Bros clubs to use it to disseminate and generate reports for their agents, which right now some clubs are paying $1,200 a month, and the turnaround time to disseminate those reports to the agents is 12 hours. This is instantaneous.
I gotcha. Okay, so if somebody wants to take advantage of this entire system, that can certainly help with those types. All right, look, you've shown. I'm gonna pull this back and have us here. You've shown that you're an entrepreneur. You build stuff. You built software. Do you code it yourself?
No, that's the reason why I get that's. You can say that was my one main regret was when I went to college. I got my MBA in 4 years. I should have gone computer science, I think, and I think I collectively made over $1 million in poker. I spent most of it on coders.
Oh wow! So what stakes do you mostly play? I forget. I don't think you answered that when I asked you earlier.
I never play. I don't play anything higher than 2.5 live because playing 2.5 live, like I can dominate the game. Where when it was WinStar, it was 500 cap buy-in. I was like my bankroll. I just needed 5,000. I never went bust though. 10 buy-ins at 500 cap buy-in. This game probably I can't, if I have at the TCH, if I have 10K bankroll, I can't go bust though. But to move up to the next level at 510, I probably have to have 100K, 200K bankroll to play comfortably the way I play, because it's not the same level of play anymore. You're taking a big notch, and at that point, I'd rather use my money somewhere else.
I see. So let's see.
Yeah, like my background in economics and everything has a cost, opportunity cost.
Are you open to taking on students to mentor them in order to improve their mental game? I imagine that even existing poker pros that feel suffering and some of the other things that can happen would gain value from that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you open for coaching?
I'm open to anything, but so during COVID, I got my yoga license, but
interesting.
I didn't go teach because I don't want to make money from yoga. I want to use it as an opportunity to help people. So my goal is to somehow integrate poker and yoga and disseminate information better. Coaching will not be plus EV in terms of being able to share my knowledge. Is
Well,
what.
but again, though, I'm trying to take it away from teaching them poker. I'm trying to take it toward teaching them how to be uh, mentally strong, right? Like this is the real value that you've described being able to get from poker. Yeah, you make money at poker. Yeah, you said that you probably made over $1 million, and you said you started in 2008. And if you do some quick math, that's like 80,000-90,000 a year playing poker in that time. But that aside, like the suffering that we take, that our friend Patrick took with his aces story in our lives, is something that people gain a lot of value. And listen, something I've learned as true poker dealer is when you truly want to help people and they want to give to you, there's nothing wrong with receiving it, because it makes both you and them feel good if you can learn how to receive. Right. So my question to you is, if somebody, say that there's a 2-5 player that's at TCH Dallas right now today, and they feel like they're good enough to be there long term, they feel like they're a winning poker player, but they definitely suffer and they don't need to suffer. And they say, here, I want to give you X amount of dollars to work with me every hour so that I can improve my mental game. Is that something that you'd be open to? That's all I'm asking, man.
It is. It's actually a thought. I thought about it. So this is where my venture would be more interesting, right? I actually thought of turning myself into a social enterprise, where, okay, well, you don't give me money, don't pay me money. I'll create some kind of nonprofit where you just put your money there, and we'll. But it's not a charity, because I don't want to be having people donate money. I want this to be a business. But this business should not be for my profit. It should be for profit, so that I can generate profit to do other things, like host events or something, or just generate content or something like that. But that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around is, I want to, like, this crypto, like this NFT and this crypto boom right here is giving my head a spin on opportunities. And, well, how do we change this concept of charity? Instead of charity, we do social enterprise, where it's open ledger, right? That's the biggest problem with charity right now, is we don't know where the money's going and everything. But if we use crypto, well, and open ledger and blockchain, well, all that, we have full disclosure now. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around how I can use, like you say, poker coaching, yoga coaching, poker knowledge, all this, and try to wrap my head around crypto and everything, and try to make one big fun project.
I like where you're going with that. I also would love to hear you just say, yeah, if someone wants to pay me per hour, I would take them on if the vibe's right. And then you can take the money that they give you and put it in this other thing too. So it's not complicated for them. But I also understand that, I'm asking you this in the moment, and you haven't taken any time to really think it through and all that stuff either. So you don't have a specific answer. I've been in that situation.
The specific answer is probably not, because like that, like TCH have a stream game going right now, right? And somebody offered to stake me and all of that. And while it was interesting, that itself was an opportunity that got my head into the same concept of, well, this money could be used for some kind of social enterprise. Well, you want coaching, you want to stake me? Well, I'm just gonna put all the money together, but I want to wrap my head around all that before I can say yes.
I gotcha. You just want it to feel right and in line with you and everything you're trying to do. Let me see. What goes into making one of those plants in the background?
It's easy. So you
can you hold one of those things up so that people can see it? Because you bring these into the poker room and put them on display, and they're unbelievable. And you said that you make these things.
Yes. Very simple.
Has fish in it and everything.
So you start off with rocks from the pet store. You go to PetSmart. Just get any rock color you want. Then use bottled water, and then use certain plants that will do well in low light or indoor lights and rooted water. So I know those plants. So if anybody want to know, I could tell you what plants to look towards, like monstera, peace lily, pothos, bamboos. Stick around those. If you walk around the majority of those, and you just wash, kind of get those. But the key is, you want to go to the pet store and get those snails, because when you clean out the roots, originally those roots have rots and dirt and everything. So you put in a bucket or something, let those snails kind of work their way eat and clean it, and you just change out the water. That's how you clean the roots. And
Can
then
you show us one of the snails?
um see here, it's kind of like, so I personally like grow pond snails. Somehow I found them, and I just got lucky, so I just grow them, and they're very hard to see. They're
We
very
can't see it.
small. Yeah,
So you're
like
saying
there,
that there's tiny little snail. Oh, it's the
yeah,
one that's toward the
that
top, right by the
little
water
thing
level.
right there.
Yeah.
So those guys keep the water turning, and they eat the roots and all that stuff. So that way it the water doesn't kind of get sit still and get funky.
Interesting. In terms of working on your mental game, these are just some other questions that I have. I appreciate you saying that. What do you eat and drink throughout the day when you're playing poker for a day?
I'm getting into the habit of having loose leaf tea and just drink tea and just fill up my cup with hot water, because I think I read the Chinese tend to be, have drink a lot of hot tea, and it helps with the digestions and a lot of hot water. Whereas Americans tend to drink a lot of cold beverages, which kind of coagulate all your stuff in your gut. So I focus more on warm water, and then I just drink water, and I just eat. In general, I eat whatever I want. I don't want, but what I want is what's good for me. That's the key. Is I've trained myself to want what's good for me. Most people want what's bad for them, and they avoid what's good for them. So I try to balance. Like, okay, well, I want a pizza, but so I eat a pizza once a month. I know, like, I see people go like just chugging pizza every day, and I just like that stuff is, and they can. I just like they don't see it. But I see. It's kind of like a poker hand. Some people just see their hands. Some people see how the what's gonna come on the flop, what's gonna come on turn. It's that third vision, that third eye, that's seeing, and we always talk about it. So some people if they see the damage that they're doing to themselves, they will immediately stop eating. It's not Nobody's gonna tell them to stop eating the pizza. They were just like, oh man, this is sick.
So what's something like, what did you eat today so far?
I usually eat soup. Stick to Vietnamese cuisine, because Vietnamese cuisine is based on a lot of herbs, vegetable, and a lot of soup, which is it stick to my diet revolves around a lot of brothy soup.
I love me some pho. I absolutely
Yeah,
love it.
it is like
Is
it's kind of like
is
fun
that the
because
soup you're saying?
yeah, because it fills you up, but you don't get full, and it digests quickly.
Interesting.
Yeah, and
Do
then
you
you
drink
cook your
coffee or caffeine? Well, you said tea. Do you ever have coffee?
I know, Bill, because
I'm trying to picture myself trying to meditate after I have coffee. Like, I just don't see it happening.
no, because your mind's racing, and then you all got all those jitters and everything. I used to drink Starbucks, but that's more of a dessert. But I cut that out because all that sugar is starting to catch up.
So when you say that you desire things that are good for you, it's because you've worked on that part of yourself a lot, where you're trying to give yourself the plus EV and nutrition, right?
Yeah.
And so you've associated good with good decisions, which is a poker thing. How much do you sleep every night?
I sleep until I feel like waking up.
Oh, so you never set an alarm. You just let yourself
Oh,
go until you're done sleeping?
I just go whenever I want to go sleep. I go sleep, and when I'm done, I wake up. I have a very simple life.
If only we could all be like that. But our patterns get us into situations where we can't be like that. So if we desire the thing that we hear when you say that, maybe we should evaluate our patterns in life a bit more, right?
Correct. We just
So
it's once we see it, we drop it off. It's the seeing. It's just that seeing.
So in terms of the decision of going to the poker room, how do you know when it's time for you to head to the poker room? Like, is it a feeling? Do you plan when you're going to be there? Like, how do you know when it's time to go play poker?
It's a club. I just go there to hang out and play and have fun.
No, but like, so you wake up in the morning. Are you saying I'm going to go there at 12? Are you just like, I feel like playing poker, I'm going to go there, or something else?
The latter.
So you just, whenever you feel like going, you go.
Yeah, and then if I don't feel like going, but most time I feel like going, and lately I got nothing else to do, so I have to. I have to go.
And
But I
so
have to, but
when you're there, how do you select your game?
I pretty know who the strong players are and who everybody's tendencies and exploits are, so I know what table dynamic is best for me. I don't I don't like for example, I like to see flops, so I don't like to play with people that just want to three bet and isolate. It's a different type of game, but then because I make I make good decisions multi-way compared to relative to other people. Whereas if when you're in a three bet pot, it's mostly head up where now it's a lot more math based and kind of a calculating base. Whereas multi-way is a lot of systematic and strategy and reads. So I enjoy that kind of game more. And that's why I look for people that don't three bet and forces out recreational players. It kind of annoys me when people don't recognize that, hey, you got to leave the recreational players in because you're chasing them away and you're kind of not letting them have fun. So I call my style fish friendly. I limp a lot. I don't three bet. I call. I kind of let you come in the pod. I don't run you over or anything like that. And eventually, I slice them slowly. And then one day they look down to like
Interesting. So
yeah,
you have a strategy of poker playing where you're giving up some potential early street value in exchange for possibly being able to stack a fish later on.
correct. Like, so if we want to talk about poker strategy, like everybody has a preference on how they want to play, where based on variance, aggression. You know, you like to gamble, you like to do things. So you basically like poker is this is about balance. Like you give, you take. Like if you're going to three bet a lot, well, you out of balance in certain spots. So there's no like I guess there's no right or wrong. Like, yeah, if you don't three bet, then you could see more flops and you could do the things. So that's where poker teaches you how to be balanced and you develop your strategy based on what you want to do and not what other people do. Because there's no really incorrect way or not. The only way is you got to know how to balance your strategy correctly.
I mean, amen to that. For me personally, I've been working on a different project other than True Poker Dealer called Live Poker Coaching with the poker pro Mike Lockey, and it's really challenging for me to play poker the way that he does because a lot of the way that he plays poker is based on his personality and the things that he learns through that. And so I have to just sort of take from it what I'm able to, but apply it to me and specifically in my game. At the same time, it's really helpful having that person to point out all of my, as we call it in poker, all of my leaks, right? But I like the thing you're saying. I've never considered losing value in earlier streets to keep fish in the pot in order to be able to stack them is really the way that I picture the thing that you're saying. How do you identify a fish? What are some ways that your observation skills point out a fish?
So I tell people if you want to get good at poker, watch showdowns because showdown tone is the final pattern. And it takes me about two showdowns to pick up a person's pattern from the way they read pre-flop, the position. If you're very observant, because most people like there's only certain categories of poker player, you know, aggressive, passive, trap, bluff. So once you pick up a pattern, you could categorize them, and then use another showdown, you confirm your read, and then from there you identify, okay, well this person made this play at this spot. This is not a professional play, and then you identify that, and recognize, okay, well, this got to be a recreational player.
Ooh, that's very helpful. This question was just asked. It says, Tommy mentioned that he could offer insight into poker dealing while keeping a calm mind. I'd love to hear what he has to say on that if it hasn't been covered. It has not been covered. And yeah, we did sort of give you the floor and say you were going to talk about dealing, and then we never got back to it. So now's the time.
All right, so we mentioned that you need like a kind of some kind of start and stopping point as a to train your mind. And when you can meditate doing anything, but it has to be very simple stuff like you're cleaning, you're wiping things down, you're walking. Is basically watching your breathing as you're performing these actions, but you're also observing yourself doing these actions. So as a poker dealer, every time you reset that hand when you start shuffling and dealing and pitching out, it's a very systematic work action that you're doing where you could actually watch yourself doing it, but you can also watch your breathing. And I think this is a good opportunity every time you go through that motion to meditate, because it creates that environment for you to actually do it.
Well, I think that answer makes sense, and I appreciate that answer. And, you know, as someone who's jumped back into dealing again, it is incredibly automated once you get used to it a little bit, because the motions are almost the same. So from the moment that the previous hand is over up until the cards are all pitched out in somebody's action, that does give you, you know, maybe 15, 20 seconds sometimes, especially if you're dealing Omaha, or as we call it at TCH, Congress, which is big O, high low. That gives you some time to do all that, and just focus on your breathing while you're doing it, because your mind is in autopilot if you want it to be for those things, right?
Correct.
I think that's a helpful insight, and it's a very specific time frame too, which is also really helpful.
But it's not a pattern. That's the key. There's no pattern created, because every deal is different. You're dealing to different players in different positions, so there's no pattern. That's the key.
Sometimes you're 6-handed and you're not dealing to seats 3, 4, and 7. Sometimes you're 9-handed and you're dealing to everybody at the table. Sometimes the button is in this seat. Sometimes it's in this seat. Yeah. And so you're starting in different parts. So it's not, I see what you're saying by patterns. And so you're avoiding the trap of patterns is something that you seem to put a lot of value to, correct?
Correct.
Why is that again?
Because then you develop habits, and habits causes you to fall asleep.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm thinking through. I read a couple of books on habits, actually. Both of them are really powerful. One's called Atomic Habits, and the other one's called The Power of Habit. And both of them teach. The intention behind the books is actually to bring light to that, so you have control over changing your habits and all that stuff. So
a lot of life and stuff, it's gonna start sounding paradoxical, because it is. Like the mental life versus the material life is very paradoxical, and you know it because you hear these paradoxical phrases like the giving is in the receiving. I mean, the receiving is in the giving, right?
That's true. Yeah,
a lot of paradoxical stuff.
Now, in terms of training yourself all the way to get to be the top level, you had mentioned the 4 stages of something. Can you take us back there? Because I kept interrupting you as you were going through that. So the first one is you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What are the 4 stages of what?
4 stages of learning. You want to learn anything in life, not just poker. You want to get better at anything in life. You just repeat this pattern. So you don't know that you don't know. So then now the next stage is you know that you don't know. So you start working on it. So I'm going to use a easy example of driving a car. At first, you don't know that you don't know how to drive a car. Like if car didn't exist, you don't know that you don't even know how to drive a car. But once you get into a car and you're like, oh, well, I don't know. Well, now I know I don't know. So what happens? Every little movement you're paying attention, like your foot, your gas, your hand, like you're intensely aware of this action. So you're focusing on this. So, and then the next stage is now I know that I know. Well, you mastered it. You know that you're driving now. And the final stage is when this is the A game stage, autopilot. It's the unconscious competence. It's the you don't know that you know. It's kind of like driving now. You don't need to know. You don't need to sit there and watch it. It's just autopilot. And anything you do, like in poker, once you do it enough, it becomes autopilot. For example, like raising aces. Nobody told us to raise aces. We don't think about raising aces. The minute we get it, we raise aces. It become autopilot. We train ourselves because we develop this pattern and thing, and we know is good. So once we get aces, we don't have to think about, well, what's my EV here? It's 80-20. If somebody call, we don't think about that. We just raise. So that's the easy example of how we develop ourselves through these stages of learning. And anything like that, walking, driving, exercising, getting better, just cooking, just go through it. But the first stage is the hardest because you gotta be lucky sometimes.
And that luck is if someone who is, even though they might be confrontational, is nice enough to point it out to you or something like that, to show you what's sometimes called a blind spot, which is the stuff that you don't know that you don't know. Correct?
Yeah. Or in my case is, failing on these startups might be a good thing. I learned these things because I think had I been successful early, I would have been washed away in pleasures and all this, life material things that all the rich people get. That's why the Bible says easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get to heaven. And I understand it because as a poker player, when you have money, you get drowned in pleasures and excitement, and you get washed away at this party, and you lose that sense of urgency and that awareness of yourself.
That makes sense. I've seen the statistics where people who make more than $95,000 a year are less happy than people that make between like 70,000 and 95 or something like that. Because I don't know what those statistics are based on, but I believe them, right? Like,
because they've acquired mental problems before, like people who don't have the money, they have physical problems, right? They can't sleep, they don't get enough sleep, they don't get enough food, they got to work hard, they got to labor. Once you get that money, well, now you've gone into mental problems. Material, I don't have this person, what does this person think of me? I don't have that dress, I want this, I don't have that. All mental problems now. And mental problems is way worse than physical problems. Physical problems, you just deal with it. Mental problems, nobody sees it, nobody can help you.
Yeah, something that keeps coming up for me when I have conversations like this, to quote Naval Ravikant, someone who he's written some really cool books, and he's an angel type startup guy in Silicon Valley and a philosopher. He says the number one way to avoid the need for more and more and more money is to not upgrade your lifestyle when you get it, right? Right. And that essentially comes from you're avoiding giving yourself more mental problems by needing more stuff and creating these habits that you keep speaking of. So you talked about these 4 stages of learning, which I know that this is something I've heard before from somewhere to a degree, and I understand that you're incorporating it into a new setting, which is poker, which is a really beautiful thing. But really there's a step before that we talked about way at the beginning of this live stream, which is observation. And the whole point of all of this value that we're bringing to this table here in this conversation is, if you learn to observe yourself, you actually have the power to see into some of these blind spots through this small game of poker compared to the big game of life, right?
Correct.
Now, how do you get the people at the table with you or the people in your life to stop being nice and start actually telling you stuff?
The real answer is you don't. Right now, like that's the problem. I guess that's the issue with this world, is we're all trying to fix what's outside of us, and the real problem is we just gotta fix ourselves.
So you're saying become more self-responsible and correct. Continue to look at yourself with that observation microscope. Use breathing use observing your breathing and focusing on your breathing and meditating at the table and in life as a way to put that microscope on your observations of yourself and give yourself a chance to see your own blind spots, right?
Correct. Because you can't change the world if you can't even change yourself. It's another form of illusion. And it's just an escape from what's in front of us. So what's most important is we got to change what we can do and what's right in front of us. And if we change enough of ourselves, we will impact the people around us. And from there, it causes a ripple effect, and which is how change happened, not through some external, because then it's just some kind of revolt or revolution, and that doesn't work.
So I'm going to be real vulnerable for a second, and I'm going to sort of put you to the test in terms of coaching me in this moment. I think this will be sort of interesting. So for me, I've been in relationships for a really long time, and I'm single for the first time in a very long time. having been, in and out of relationships that now I'm not, I'm found that I haven't found the thing that I really want. And I'd love to feel a certain way and all this stuff. So how can I use your techniques to help myself get the love in my life that I would genuinely enjoy?
I will give you a simple phrase that might give you some deep insight, is that there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. And lonely is a state of mind that comes from attachment to certain feelings. And right, what you have probably, and what most people have, is that sense of loneliness that comes from attachments to certain emotions that you have become habitual or desire. But these emotions are false because they're based on your past experience, which if you can just erase them, then well, your thoughts are gone and you have a fresh mind and you won't be attached to memories of old, which will generate negative emotions, which causes you to suffer.
So I appreciate that. And, I'm putting myself on the spot, willing to be vulnerable, which
Yeah.
I'm totally fine with. And I appreciate it. Was it hard to give me real feedback? Because I'm going to comment on what you said in a second, but I'm curious, like, was it hard to do that?
No, because you're not, while most people think they're unique, what you're going through is what the entire world is
It's
going
regular, right?
through.
So to that point, the thing that I'm hearing you say, because I figured if I ask you a real question where I'm vulnerable and it's truly about me, then people will see the power of this in poker too. But what you're really saying here, if I understood it right, is, hey, if I'm suffering and I have a desire and therefore I'm not getting that desire, which is the type of love that I want in life, there's a fact there that I could look at, which is there's suffering going on, and that's an opportunity for growth. And it's an opportunity to realize that means that I have patterns in my personal experience that are leading me down this path of even feeling the way that I feel. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what everybody's doing.
And so then the next step for me in this is to find those patterns, realize where they're coming from, which is work, right?
Yeah.
And essentially allow myself to find peace outside of those patterns and not feel this like need for this other thing. Instead, just be me, and then I'll eventually be happy one way or another, which is ultimately what it's all about.
Correct. Except there's one, you gotta
do it.
You gotta work hard at it, because like everybody knows these things, but they don't act on it because they don't have that insight. And it's like right now everybody still cling onto the GI Joes. And until they look closely at that GI Joe and realize that GI Joe has no value, they're still gonna cling on to it. And
so even the thought that like I want to be with somebody is something that's implanted into me from somewhere. It's a pattern, right?
But not only that, but you got to look even deeper into it. Like that's where insight gives you, like, where does that thought originate from? And like, how do you go, like, then you even go deeper. What is a thought? So then you realize that like thoughts arise from your perception. Like the core of everything is like, once you are able to, like, so what I'm trying to do is just to give you insight. I'm like, there's no method to fix anything. Like, it's just the deeper you can see things, the less value you will see those things are, and that's it.
And Jason here says powerful insight. Wow, yeah. Definitely appreciate that comment. And that was in relation to your original responses when you put that, your original response to me in terms of my experience and the question I was asking about me trying to find love. I definitely appreciate this conversation and the way that you go about the game of poker and the game of life. And I also, as a fellow entrepreneur, I'm rooting for you, although you seem to have found peace outside of startups now, which is sort of cool to hear.
Yeah, I'm concerned that I'm concerned that success will corrupt me.
Listen, I get it. Yep.
And then, like, then we ask at the end of the day, what are we trying to achieve? Like, I still, right? I'm trying, like, okay, I keep telling myself that in order to do great things, I need a big bankroll. But then it conflicts with my idea that, like, you don't need to do like like, let's just say like the universe is too big. Like, all numbers are relative. Helping one person could be the same thing as helping a million persons. It's all relative. So maybe I should just focus my attention on helping one person. Right. So I do have a daughter. And so that's where I dedicate all my attention. Like, because I say maybe, maybe I don't have to help the world. I just got to help one person, because it's all relative.
Well, this is your journey, right? This is the thing
Yeah.
that we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful in itself. And definitely appreciate that. Appreciate this conversation. It's not as popular. It's not as sexy to talk about this when we talk about poker as it is to talk about winning, buckets of money. But at the same time, there's a reason that this is what we're talking about. There's a reason that we're saying, the secrets to happiness that you can learn through poker aren't in the money that you make, right?
Correct.
So listen, for the people that watch this, I know that they're going to appreciate that we're not just focused on the money, right? It doesn't have to be about that. And we've heard a ton of lessons that you learned in life through the game of poker, and it doesn't hurt that you're able to win at it long term. I imagine that becoming a winning poker player is an important piece to this, because it allows you to continue to enjoy this game and get value from it from these other ways as well, or at least break even, right?
Play the game to play the game.
That's a very cool saying. Play the game to play the game. Well, I feel complete now, and I do have a timeline that I have to get to, so I can't stay on too much longer. But appreciate you coming here. We'll take a second if anyone else has any other questions for you. Just sort of scrolling up real quick. Patrick, at the very beginning, it said, thoughts on cardistry. I've seen some really cool videos, people doing crazy tricks with the cards. Yeah, I mean, cardistry is harder to do in casinos. I even did a live stream where I sort of talked about that. It's just people doing tricky things with cards while they're dealing. It's not super related to this conversation. I'm just popping it up there. But anything that you want to say for closing?
Just meditate more at the poker table. Don't just iterate. This is like just stack your chips. Every iteration is a stack. Like, there's no wasted iteration. Just every hand, every iteration, every breath is a stacking.
That makes sense. And also something that I think I'm hearing in this conversation is, if you repeat over and over again things that are very specific, then you create patterns for yourself. And that's one thing that's really powerful about meditating, is you're doing the opposite of that. You're training the muscle in your mind to relax and not have patterns. Is that true?
The ultimate goal is to hold your mind still. And holding your mind still means not thinking and watching your breath. You cannot think if you're watching your breathing. So it's that simple. You can always know that you're doing it correctly because you're watching your breathing, giving all your attention to your breathing.
I like it. Play the game to play the game.
Yep.
All right. We're out. Thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate all of you. This has been me and Tommy on True Poker Dealer.